Eline Kersten, you're one of the last ones because after this we're going to have baby books. It's very nice to have you here. So Eline Kersten is part of the LBK program that we have. So each year we nominate a person from the region as part of the Limburg Beeldende Kunst Award. You got it last year and you spent 6 months at the Jan van Eyck Academy to make the work that you also presented at the Open Studios. And then some of it is here. And it's also part of older work that you made and part of an oeuvre, let's say. Nice to have you. I'm going to give you the throne and good luck.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Very welcome to be here. Thank you for coming here. I'm very happy to do my participant presentation at my solo exhibition here at the Bonnefante Museum, where I show 3 works. These are 3 of my most recent works, so they're all made in 2025, and some I started a little bit in 2024. And I'm showing a series of glassworks called Timekeepers, which I've made before my residency started. It was the last thing that I finalized before coming to Maastricht, before coming to the Jan van Eyck Academy. At the Jan van Eyck Academy, I developed All That Remains. It's a series of screen prints, which 3 of them I showed at the Open Studios, and 1 of them is more recent. And then finally, I also developed a kinetic sculpture, which you can see in the room on the left there. Before the residency ends, which is very soon, but before it ends, I'm creating one more thing, and that is a booklet, which I'm currently printing at the print lab together with Anne. And in that booklet, I am reflecting upon 2 of the works that you can see right here. It's the screen print series as well as the kinetic sculpture. And then there's a 3rd work that I reflect upon in the book, and that is a 3-channel film installation that I made a few years ago. And those 3 bodies of, these 3 works, they are connected through their thematic. They all have to do with wildfires, and they have to do with the role of fire in the ecosystem. Now, for the booklet, I commissioned a curator, author, a friend, Marjolein who's also here, to write an essay. And for me, it felt very natural to ask her, because when I first was starting to think about wildfires 3+ years ago, at the very, very beginning, Marjolein came to Switzerland. She came to visit me, and we had dinner together. And I opened up, it was, I would say, the first expert I ever opened up to about wanting to maybe work on this theme. And she encouraged me a lot, and she encouraged me to explore different perspectives in the wildfire discourse, or the discourse around wildfires. And I'm very glad that over the past few months we've had the occasion to continue our conversation, to meet in the studio, to talk about the development of work. And she has written a beautiful essay that collects many of those ideas, that builds upon them, that unpacks other ideas, and also mentions some of my works. This essay will be in the book that I'm currently making, but since you cannot see the book, I thought this would be the perfect occasion to share the text with you. And so you can take a copy and you can spread it around, and we can read the text together right now. Okay, there we go. Living with Fire by Marjolein van der Loo. In the kitchen, I turn a knob, and the circle-shaped blue flame appears. A perfect, efficient, almost sterile combustion. The fire rises from the stovetop with exactly the size I want. No more, no less. It barely moves. It doesn't flicker or wander. I don't need to know anything about air pressure, oxygen saturation, fuel load, or humidity. I don't think about wind, about the weather, or when it last rained. This is my daily relationship with fire, a cosmic force that shaped entire worlds. Technological advancements have always reshaped societies, creating factions of those who hold on to the old and those who leap toward the new. I imagine the domestication of fire by early humans about 1.7 to 2 million years ago was similar. The technology of initiating fire and the revolutionary opportunities gave early humans warmth, protection, cooking, and companionship in the night. These aspects are crucial to the survival of humans and their cultures. I imagine deep in prehistory, this evolution created a partition. Some, convinced by their ability to kindle fire everywhere, at times with disastrous consequences. Others still clinging to raw diets, wary of getting burned. Probably fire has never been neutral. It has divided, created traditions, forged ways of life. Fire historian Stephen Pine relates fire as a physical phenomenon to a cultural and intellectual framework. He describes two dominant stories in the Western imagination: the Promethean narrative, in which fire is a tool of progress, something to be controlled, optimized, and disciplined, and the companion narrative, in which fire is a partner, something humans collaborate with rather than conquer. In this second story, fire shapes landscapes, nourishes ecosystems, and lives alongside people. In the first, fire is something to fear, to extinguish, and eliminate. Our relationship with fire moves in parallel with the arc of culture itself. Fire made us human, yet we have increasingly concealed it, managed it, fenced it in. And in the Netherlands, this is particularly visible, not only as a part of the energy transition that aims to replace fossil fuels, like natural gas, with renewable energy sources, but also because, for the first time in human history, we are shifting toward forms of energy that do not produce fire at all. Solar panels, wind turbines, heat pumps, electric stoves generate heat and power, but no flame. Fire cannot be generated from renewable energy sources. Combustion is absent. As a result, the visible presence of fire in daily life has all but vanished. We now live with energies we no longer recognize as fire. Electricity pulsing through cables, heat pumps and induction cooktops humming quietly. Fire has been outsourced into power plants, into fossil fuel extraction fields far from view, into geopolitical infrastructures. Fire has become invisible. Ironically, this disappearance happens at the very moment when fire returns with urgency outside our homes, in the form of wildfires. The energy transition is both a response to the consequences of our historic reliance on fossil fuels, fossil combustion heating the planet, and a further removal of fire from our everyday sensory experience. News images show scorched forests, erupting peatlands, and smoke-filled skies. But climate change is only part of the story. The rise of wildfires is also the product of a much deeper history: colonial land practices, Enlightenment thought that frames nature as something to master, and social changes in mobility, land use, and knowledge. Across the world, many indigenous cultures have long shaped their landscape with fire, not against it. Aboriginal peoples in Australia, the Miwok, Karuk, and Yurok in California, numerous communities across the Americas, Africa, and Asia, they practice cultural burning, small-scale seasonal fires that open landscapes, encourage biodiversity, prevent catastrophic megafires, and sustain food systems. Michael Pollan has written about cooking as a defining evolutionary turning point, tying it to Aboriginal fire knowledge. Fire shaped not only our diet, but our bodies and society. Moreover, these cultural practices, sometimes referred to as the good fire, are performed for a wide range of reasons and often play a spiritual role. Robin Wall Kimmerer in Braiding Sweetgrass describes fire as relational, something that teaches responsibility, reciprocity, and care. Fire as teacher, as elder, as renewal. The Netherlands too has a fire history, one we have largely forgotten. As wildfire scientist Katelijne Stoof points out, wildfires have always existed in the Netherlands. Much of our landscape, especially heathland, was shaped by fire. Heathland is not a naturally formed landscape, but a cultural type that rejuvenates through burning. Traditional farming involved controlled burns, producing ash that enriched the soil. Small burns helped maintain open landscape and prevented the buildup of flammable material. But most of that knowledge eroded through urbanization, aging rural populations, agricultural industrialization, and a cultural shift in which fire is seen primarily as danger, not as a companion. In many European countries, fire traditions have faded. This is a form of epistemic loss. Embodied practical knowledge is replaced by abstract diagrams and risk calculations. However marginal or decreasing, traditional and pagan fire celebrations like Easter bonfires, Martinmas, and New Year's fires survive in the Netherlands. These rituals carry ancient intuitions, fire as cleansing, communal, protective, and transformative. But even these practices are increasingly pressured by safety concerns, pollution regulations, and the cultural fear of what fire can do when it is no longer fully understood. This fear is not only ecological, it is cultural. Western modernity, shaped by Enlightenment rationality and colonial worldviews, cast nature as something to manage, as a resource, as property. Wildness, especially fire, was historically seen as a threat to order and progress. In colonial territories, fire used by indigenous peoples was often criminalized or forbidden, replaced by universal fire suppression policies. Ironically, these policies increase the risk of catastrophic fires by allowing vegetation to accumulate. That same mindset is echoed in contemporary Dutch land management. Nature becomes a system of compartments, management plans, targets, and controls. But nature is not an engineering diagram, and fire certainly is not. Suppressing fire means suppressing ecological dynamism, and disconnecting from fire as a cultural element makes us more vulnerable, not safer. Art can help restore our relationship with fire by altering how we perceive it, by making its rhythms, scales, and contradictions visible again. In While the Fire Burns, a 3-channel video installation by Eline Kersten, fire is not presented as a single event or a simple disaster narrative, but as a constellation of processes that move across intensities, ecologies, and intentions. Kersten weaves together several manifestations of fire: footage of a fast-moving wildfire in the Swiss Alps, thermal recordings captured by firefighters, and scenes of small, carefully tended controlled burns in alpine shrublands. These perspectives make visible what is often overlooked in European fire discourse: the profound difference between wildfire and controlled burning. In the wildfire sequences, filmed with a macro lens that allows the camera to approach the flames unusually close, fire behaves like a living organism. It burrows into the soil, smolders deep underground, twists and recoils, enchanting as much as it destroys. The imagery is otherworldly, almost mythic, revealing a form of fire that exceeds human pacing and control. By contrast, the controlled burn is slow, contained, and almost clinical. A cleared fire break frames the area. The flames stay low, move quickly over the ground, generate limited heat, and do not penetrate the soil. In their wake, yellow blossoms appear, evidence of fire as an ecological instrument rather than an ecological catastrophe. By placing these scenes in dialogue, Kersten shows that fire is not one thing, but many: a force of destruction, a driver of regeneration, a land-shaping process, a cultural choice. The installation's looping structure, supported by a specially composed soundtrack by Piotr Laschheid, that sonically amplifies each stage of the burn, allows viewers to enter the work at any moment and still encounter the full cyclicality of fire. While the Fire Burns moves kaleidoscopically through space and time, ultimately asking a question at the heart of this essay: how might we learn to live with fire again, now and in the future? This raises a deeper question: what kinds of fire do humans use? And what do those choices reveal about us, our cultures, our landscapes, our gendered traditions? Jungian psychoanalyst and storyteller Clarissa Pinkola Estes describes the life-death-life cycle as a fundamental pattern in nature: destruction as necessary for renewal, fire as the force that clears the way for new growth. In many traditions, fire is intertwined with feminine knowledge: the hearth as a place of storytelling, care, birth, death; fire as protector, as destroyer, as transformer; fire as mother and midwife; fire as the keeper of cycles rather than the enforcer of linear progress. In this series of screen prints, All That Remains by Kersten, fire and its cyclical nature become tangible through charcoal samples collected from various burn sites. Drunen in the Netherlands, Swiss mountain forest and the Mechelse Heide. Charcoal is fire's archive. Each fragment carries the imprint of a specific burn, its tree species, the intensity of heat, the moisture of the soil, the speed of the flames. A Scots pine burns differently from a silver fir. Some species, like certain apple varieties, even depend on fire to trigger seed release. Anthropologist Radek Grabowski reads charcoal the way an archaeologist reads ancient pottery shards. Under the microscope, each piece reveals cellular structures, internal fractures and growth patterns that record the intimate encounter between forest and flame. Kersten selected and reworked Grabowski's microscopic images, drawing out compositions that feel simultaneously geological, botanical, and abstract. In the silkscreen prints, the charcoal becomes landscape again. Cellular patterns resemble mountain ridges, cracked surfaces echo dried riverbeds, and vascular structures recall neural networks or root systems. These images do not simply document fire, they visualize its afterlife. Charcoal, after all, is not only residue. In ecological terms, it can act as a regenerative substrate, improving soil structure, retaining water and nutrients, and providing habitat for microbial communities. It is the material through which fire continues to shape an ecosystem long after the flames have passed. There is also an art historical resonance here. Charcoal is one of the oldest drawing materials, used for tens of thousands of years to trace outlines of animals on cave walls and to sketch early human cosmologies. By transforming charcoal from burn sites into pigment for printing, All That Remains closes a long historical loop. The same substance that once marked the first human images now records the marks left by contemporary landscapes in the wake of fire. What survives the burn becomes the medium for seeing. In this way, the series reveals that fire is not a single phenomenon, but a constellation of fire regimes, each shaped by local ecology, by the species that burn, by human practices, and by the long regenerative afterlives inscribed in charcoal itself. This attention to what fire leaves behind opens the door to broader traditions in which fire is not merely an agent of destruction, but a partner in ecological and cultural practice. Indigenous fire practices can offer invaluable lessons, not to imitate directly, but to understand their worldview. Kimmerer writes about fire as relationship, about listening to land, about tending rather than dominating. In Australia, fire custodians walk through the grasses with small flames in their hands, reading the wind, watching birds, adjusting to humidity and slope. The fire moves in relation to land, not in obedience to human command. This relational attention resonates quietly in Eline Kersten's work Life by Any Other Name, a kinetic mobile composed of burned wood and seed pods of fire-adapted species, some fully charred, others half burned, some opening only through heat. Suspended from thin black rods like drawn lines, the fragments drift with a passers-by movement or a faint current of air, suggesting that what we call remains still holds agency, motion, and ecological possibility. Without claiming indigenous knowledge, the work gestures towards ecosystems, often outside Europe, where plants, people, and fire have evolved in long-standing reciprocity. A better relation to fire in Europe demands relearning how to listen to fire, but also to landscape, history, ecological process, and indigenous peoples. This requires a different kind of knowledge, embodied, contextual, cyclical, not merely managerial. When we connect this to Kimmerer's teachings, a rich picture of relationality emerges, and when read alongside Clarissa Pincola's Esté's Life, Death, Life cycle, fire takes on an even deeper symbolic dimension. It is not that fire is inherently feminine, but that the cyclical regenerative logic Estés describes, where decay nourishes renewal and endings become beginnings, parallels the ecological patterns of fire. Both resist the extractive logic of modern management. Both honor transformation as necessary for life. Both insist that destruction and regeneration are inseparable. Fire, in this broad sense, is a teacher. It teaches humility, that control is an illusion. It teaches relationships, that ecosystems respond to fire differently. It teaches time, that our human sense of duration is dwarfed by ecological cycles. And it teaches responsibility, that refusing to engage with fire does not eliminate it. It simply makes its return more destructive. The Netherlands, like many places in the world that are struggling with wildfires, stands at a crossroad. Fire will always be part of life on Earth. Maybe not anymore as a tidy blue ring on a kitchen stove, but now as an unpredictable presence in our landscapes. Climate breakdown means hotter summers, drier heathlands, and more vulnerable forests. We cannot eliminate fire, but we can decide what relationship we want with it. To live with fire again requires a new fire literacy. This literacy would include ecological knowledge, historical memory, indigenous insight, cultural practice, and artistic imagination. It would require rethinking land management, not as a system of control, but as a dialogue. It would require letting fire be what it is, a force of death and life, fear and beauty, chaos and renewal.